Throwing. No, me.
I think it worked.
Just behind me.
I can't keep aggro, you're dead. Holy shit, that was dude fucking taunt too. I mean, whatever, the boss is dead anyway.
Alrighty guys, what's up? We're back again with another video. This time a continuation onto the tier list series that I have been doing. Plague Falls was yesterday. We had the tier list where we talked through what every single dungeon was going to be ranked a couple days ago as well. So if you guys want to see everything, you can go check out those videos. Today, we're going to have Necrotic Wake. Necrotic Wake I ranked in the C tier for a multitude of reasons, and we're just going to go over those reasonings today. Basically, we're going to talk about why it should be C tier as opposed to D tier, and then some of the things that I like and what I dislike about the dungeon. I think as a whole, this series is definitely more aimed to be talking about the pros and the cons of the dungeon, and why I feel like some should be more liked generally, and why some are going to probably be more disliked generally. I want to see how these end up turning out once the expansion does launch, and I don't even know, like say 2 patches in. I think it would be kind of funny just to see where I ended up ranking stuff versus where I think about it in the end. So with that said, let's jump straight into the video. So starting with the upsides, I think the best part about Necrotic Wake is the interesting gimmicks that you can have with like the javelins, the hammers, the anima orbs, and how they increase your strategy available into the dungeons. The javelin, of course, makes the mob that you actually throw the javelin at take an increased damage taken. The hammer just does some amount of damage and can stun the target if the target is stunnable. And then the anima orb will do a pulsing AoE silence, which can be super useful for some of the mobs that are deemed a little bit more tedious because they require kick rotations, like the mages and the necromancers. The anima orbs are great to be able to use versus those. Same with the second boss, Amarth, the dragon boss. Using the anima orb on that is very sick. I think that the increase in strategy available via these gimmicks is really high. I think they're kind of buggy right now. Like if you double javelin a mob and then you hammer it, the mob just kind of dies. But I suspect that that's probably going to get changed. There's also currently a bug in the dungeons where you're able to keep the Mythic 0 items even once you begin the dungeon, which is what you saw with the very beginning, the intro video. It's like we were using double javelin into like hammer and just the mob just died. The first boss flopped. But assuming that stuff's going to get fixed like I'm going to, I actually really like these gimmicks in the dungeons. Next upside of the dungeon is Stitchflesh and Nalthor as bosses. I feel like are both really interesting by design. Stitchflesh, you have to use the hook from the Abomination to be able to get him off the platform. Then you end up having to DPS down Stitchflesh, making sure that you don't have multiple A-bombs out at once. Stitchflesh only needs to be hooked off of his podium twice, which makes this fight substantially better for Tyrannical than other fights historically have been. Honestly, big fan of this fight. They also recently added another mechanic to Stitchflesh where he will target you and run after you, similar to how some of the trash in that area ends up working out. For Nalthor, which is the final boss of Necrotic Wake, I really like the running down the platform and being picked up by the Valkyrie and like having to go do all of that stuff, and then you have to kill the ad at the end of the landing. Beyond that, being like separated out and having to drop your root zone in a good spot, while at the same time, then once you come back from the platform, having to drop those frost puddles in an area that's not that bad. I find this fight incredibly interesting. I do worry that it may be a little bit rough once we start doing high tyrannical bosses, but as it currently stands, I feel like just the bosses in Necrotic Wake, and most notably Stitchflesh and Nalthor, really help to make this dungeon pretty good. Now, let's discuss some of the downsides. First and foremost, we're going to go by order of importance. You go 45% over your enemy forces count that you need for this dungeon if you don't use a death run, an invisibility potion, a shroud, whatever. If you don't use one of those, you go 45% over your enemy forces count. This is worse than King's Rest. This is worse than Temple of Sethralus. This is worse than literally any dungeon from BFA that you could think of in terms of how much count you go over. And originally, whenever this dungeon was initially implemented, this was not the case. So I suspect that this will get changed, and I hope that it will get changed. I had a question today whenever I was streaming, and it asked, how would you go about fixing not needing to go over count in linear dungeons? And I said that you can even add the count that is required to complete the dungeon as a whole. Like, I don't know what the count is for Necrotic Wake. Say it's 450. If you're hitting 600 count and you're like, and that is just like the default hold W line through the dungeon. All right, just make the maximum amount of count that is required to be able to do that dungeon 600, or maybe even a little bit higher, 615, and then you appropriately add time to the timer to be able to accurately reflect the additional count that is required to be able to deal with this dungeon. Death runs, invisibility, shrouds, those should all be promoted but not enforced as something that is mandatory for you to be able to do the dungeon in like a strict and linear manner. And that is like the top and utmost priority of things that I feel like need to be changed about Necrotic Wake. The next thing that I am not super hot on is the checkpoints and a terrible runback. The runback is the most noticeable whenever you wipe in the Gauntlet room, like in the Necropolis, and you have to run all the way back from the very beginning of the instance to be able to make your way back towards the Necropolis. I think that this would be fixed if there was just a checkpoint after the second boss, after a Marth. This would make Necrotic Wake just substantially more forgiving in terms of how it is as a dungeon. Because once you start dying and stuff like that, and say your group is stuck in combat, like you go one of the Gauntlet trash packs into a Pride mob, you're going to be sitting on the floor for like 2 minutes because you can't make it back. If for some reason you did do a enforced skip because you're going to otherwise go 45% over count in the dungeon, and you're not playing a stealth class, you can't make it back to your group. So there's a lot of issues with this terrible runback, that the most egregious part of it is just how far it really is. So yeah, basically there should be a checkpoint after the second boss. The next thing that I don't love the most, but I suspect is probably not going to change about the dungeon, is how the Gauntlet style trash works once you are up in the Necropolis. Basically, there are 4 packs on all 4 corners of the room, and you were able to pull those. I think there's also a patrol as well, and you're able to pull that as quickly as you really want. But once all of those packs die, then you have to wait for Gauntlet style trash packs to be able to spawn, which limits the amount of time that you have to wait in between pulls, and it really reduces the creativity that otherwise could be present in this dungeon. So say you really wanted to actually bring some of your interesting abilities, like your javelins, your hammers, your anima orbs, or you wanted to say you wanted to triple anima orb the whole entire room and be able to just blow up all the trash. Like, you would be able to do that with like the first 4 packs of the room if you really wanted to, but then like the other packs, you still have to wait for those to spawn. And like, the reason that I don't like it is not because I feel like this strategy should be doable. I just don't like that it artificially reduces your creativity in the dungeon that otherwise would be present, because I think that the things that should be promoted in Mythic Plus on a fundamental level are, you should be able to be promoted by taking unique pathing, and you should be able to like chain pull with interesting strategies. I don't think that every pack needs to be able to be pulled into one another, right? But I think that if you are like CCing a couple mobs out of one pack, you should at least be able to pull that into another pack if you have the opportunity, not artificially deflating your time that you're able to actively pull mobs into other mobs because they spawn on a timer based on whenever you actually kill the final mob in that pack. So I know those things actually sound kind of daunting, but I actually want to talk about why I felt like Necrotic Wake was C tier, not D tier. And I feel like the trash is not overly tedious compared to the other D tier dungeons in The Other Side and Plaguefall. Necromancers and mages are kind of annoying, but like there's a lot of engaging trash mixed in with a lot of low impact trash, most notably at the very beginning of the dungeon. I think that is actually a great solution to be able to allow people to have something that is engaging, like you need a kick rotation or you need to be able to focus down this high priority target because it's scary, while at the same time there are just random marksmen that don't really do anything. There's a lot of other trash that is just inconsequential in the dungeon that you're able to deal with, while at the same time putting high priority and high fixation on these 2 mobs. It's a great balance of engaging. I won't even say fun, because it's not like the most fun trash I've ever seen, but it's not just annoying and daunting and like, why did they design this trash like this? Why are there so many kicks? Like, you know, the typical what the hell is this trash actually for kind of arguments that you'll end up making sometimes. So yeah, that's going to be it for the video today. Basically, I really hope that a checkpoint comes into the Necrotic Wake after the second boss, and then they do some like count adjustment, or maybe like some maybe delete a pack or 2. I don't really know what they're going to end up doing with how the dungeon structurally ends up working, but I think that the count and the checkpoint really needs to be looked at just from a developer perspective. Beyond that, I want to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comment section, and as well as that, have you guys been enjoying this video series? I plan on going through all 8 dungeons. I don't really know the order of which I'm going to go through them, but I did plan on going through all 8 dungeons. If you guys are liking the series, make sure you guys leave a like and comment down below that you've been enjoying it. And I will see you guys tomorrow for tomorrow's video. Later, guys.